Hi guys, today we are going to be reviewing the game Chess, and it is for 2 players. Now the version of Chess that I have is from the 3M Bookshelf company, but there are tons of companies that have made chess. But the object of chess is that you are going to be trying to capture your opponent's king or checkmate him to where he will not be able to move anymore. So let's take a look at it. Right over here we have the chessboard, which is going to be a checkered board here, and each person is going to be receiving 16 pieces. On the first row over here are the pawns. On the back row, there's going to be 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, the king, and then the queen. And the object of the game is you're going to be trying to capture your opponent's king, get him into a position called checkmate, into wherever he moves, he's going to end up getting captured anyway by a piece. So now these pieces are going to have different movement rules, and I'll go ahead and show them to you really quick. The pawn is going to basically be moving straight ahead. Now, in the very beginning, he'll be able to move 2 spaces, but after that, he's only going to be able to move 1. The rook will be able to move horizontally and vertically. The knight will be able to move 2 spaces and then 1 space to the left and 1 space to the right in the shape of an L. So he can move 2 here and then go here. He can move 2 here and then go here, 2 here and then go here, etc. The bishop is going to be able to move diagonally around the board, and he, along with the rook, will be able to move up as far as they possibly can to capture a piece, or even to the edge of the board. The queen is the most powerful piece. This piece can move horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, and it can move all across the board like this. Now the king will be able to move in any direction, but he's only going to be able to move 1 space at a time. Now what you're going to be doing in this game is you're going to be trying to capture your opponent's pieces. So the way a typical capture will work, the pawn, I'll start with that. If you are diagonally away from the pawn like this in front of him, and you are behind him, you'll be able to go ahead and capture the piece like that. With the rook, it means moving horizontally and vertically. Essentially, if you want to capture a piece, you're simply going to move to where the piece is and then take it off the board. And then each of the pieces are going to have that same ability. You just simply have to land on the piece that you would like to capture. Now here's a couple of interesting rules. You can do what is called castling, and this is where the rook and the king will be able to trade places in a way. Now you can only do this if the king and the rook have not been moved. To do a castling, what you'll do is you're going to move the rook over here and then the king over here. And you can do that on the king side, which is what we just did, or on the queen side, which is going to be over here. And it's a little bit different, but essentially the king is going to be moving 2 spaces over and trading places, and the rook will be next to him. So the king would be here, and then the rook would be here. And now another very interesting rule is what is called en passant, which means to pass by. Essentially the way this works is if you have like a chess piece over here, and then your opponent has, as you know, is able to move 2 spaces on his first turn. What en passant does is this is going to allow you to capture this piece if it turns out that he moves 2 spaces and lands next to you. It's a very interesting rule. So essentially what would happen if you have a pawn here and the player decided to move his pawn over here, you could do like this and capture him. Now the only time this is ever going to be able to happen is if the pawn is actually moving out 2 spaces and opponent's pawn is here. If he decides to, say, move another piece, then he's no longer to be able to capture the pawn in this way. So here's just some quick movement here. Let's say this guy goes here, this guy goes here, this guy goes here, this guy goes here. He captures this guy. This knight goes over here. This piece goes here. You can kind of see where this is going. The rook goes here. The bishop goes here. The rook goes here. The bishop goes all the way up here and captures this piece, which I wouldn't recommend. The queen captures the bishop like so. And basically on it goes. Now, if a pawn actually ends up reaching the end of the board, like over here, he will be able to go ahead and replace the pawn with any piece. So he could put another queen on the board, for example, or another rook. Now, if the king ever gets into a position where on his next turn he can get captured, say the queen moved over here and it was in the king's line of sight, the player that moved the queen in this case is going to go ahead and say check, which basically is just giving the opponent a warning that his king is in check and he's going to have to either move him or block him with another piece, like so. Now he's not going to be able to do any castling in this situation. So let's just say the king moves over here or whatever. Now what you're trying to do is you want to try to get him into a checkmate. So a checkmate example would be something like this. You have the queen over here and then you have the rook over here. The king is not going to be able to move and it would be checkmate. So if he tried to move here, he would go ahead and be able to get captured by the rook. Let's just say the queen happened to be over here, for example. and the king tried to move over there. Nope, can't do it. The queen can capture you that way. Can't do that either because the rook's going to capture you. So essentially that is going to be checkmate, and that is going to end the game, and the player that ended up either checkmating the king or capturing the king is going to win the game. A stalemate's going to occur when a player has no legal moves left. It'll occur when there is a scarcity of pieces on the board, and the only piece a player can move is his king. And then there's resignation, and if a player feels like he's quite certain he'll lose, he can concede the game and saying, "I resign." And once he does that, the game is over. A player can also propose a draw, and at any time, opponent can accept the draw or continue the game by making a move. Also, if you are moving a piece, this is a funny little rule. You just keep your finger on it like this. At this point, you can take back the move if you want to, but once you remove the finger, then the move is going to go ahead and stand. So anyway, guys, that is chess. So my final thoughts on chess. Okay, so I'm basically going to just be telling you my experience with chess, because chess is like the #1 game ever made. It sells like about 3 million copies a year, and this game has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Such an interesting history with this game. Well, my experience with chess is I am not an expert chess player. I would call myself a beginning chess player. I understand, the rules and the movement rules and things like that. But I tell you what, if you like games that make you think, if you like games that have strategy, if you like games that, where you're having to think 2 or 3 different moves ahead and you're trying to set up moves and stuff like that, chess is a great game. It is a classic game. Now, this is a kind of game like you have to practice in order to get better. It's like playing piano or something like that. The more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. You'll start to learn certain sequences of moves. You'll start to learn certain tricks. There's like names of different positions and defenses and all sorts of things like that in this game. It's a fascinating game to watch for sure, because you don't really know what the player is thinking, but he is thinking. He's trying to figure out moves, trying to trap his opponent, trying to figure out what to do defensively, trying to figure out what his opponent is trying to do. And this is why this is such a great game. Now, this game came out in the 1400s, and this was way before we had any of these games and stuff like that. And man, it's still a classic today. They still got chess tournaments going on. Game still sells great, and it's a classic game. And it's a game that's not very difficult to learn. I mean, once you learn the movement rules and stuff like that, you can get right into it. But definitely a game that takes some time to master. And yeah, it's a great game. It's not one that I play very often because I don't really think too far ahead, but I bet if I did play this enough, I would start to think that way, because I start to see that I'm actually trying to plan things as I'm playing the game. So it's kind of cool the way that works. But anyway, guys, that is my review of chess. Catch you later. Keep on gaming.